Hello everyone, this is Afternoon Live. I'm Simon McCoy. Theresa May's chief Brexit advisor, Ollie Robbins, has told MPs that the Northern Ireland backstop is a slightly uncomfortable necessity. His comments came as the government published the summary of its legal advice over the UK's withdrawal from the European Union ahead of a statement to the Commons later this evening. Well, earlier, Theresa May dismissed the possibility that she could resign if she loses the vote on her Brexit deal in Parliament next week. And in the last half hour, she's been reporting to MPs on the weekend's G20 summit. She says she had talks on trade deals with a number of other countries. Well, let's go over to Westminster, join our political correspondent Ben Wright, who's there in the lobby. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Simon. Very busy afternoon here. Theresa May's on her feet at the moment in the chamber, reporting back on that G20 in Argentina. Not much discussion of Brexit so far, updating them on her talks about trade more broadly, discussions that she had about Saudi Arabia. But she did mention that she had spoken to President Trump about Brexit and the potential in the future for trade deals with the UK. Because you'll remember a week or so ago, President Trump made what seemed like pretty disparaging and dismissive remarks about the withdrawal agreement that the Prime Minister is selling at the moment. He didn't think it was a good deal for the UK. This is what the Prime Minister said about her conversation with the US President.
I did speak to President Trump in the margins of the meeting. I was clear with him that we can indeed do a trade deal with the United States of America, with the deal that is on the table with the European Union, and we recognised the work that the working group that is in existence between the UK and the USA, looking at those trade arrangements for the future, has been making good progress in those.
So the Prime Minister there. She will be followed in about half an hour, we think, by the Attorney General. That's the real big billing this afternoon in the Commons chamber, where he is making a rare appearance in front of MPs at the dispatch box and will be explaining his understanding of the government's legal advice that they're obviously not intending to publish in full, but he will be sketching out for MPs what he has been advising the Cabinet on regarding the legal underpinnings to the withdrawal agreement. And I imagine he will face pretty tough questioning, particularly from Tory Brexiteers, about what that legal advice says regarding the Northern Ireland Protocol in the withdrawal treaty, the backstop arrangements. That is causing considerable anger, as we know, really across the House, but particularly those Conservative Brexiteers who are determined to vote against this withdrawal deal in just 9 days' time. And the UK civil servant behind much of this work, Ollie Robbins, was in front of a select committee a couple of hours ago and was asked about that backstop and what he thought of it. And this is what he told them.
I think that the backstop is not the future relationship that either the UK or the EU wants to have with one another. And so it is an uncomfortable position for both sides. And the reality, as you know, I think, Chair, in evidence from us, but also in your meetings in Brussels, is that there is not a withdrawal agreement without a backstop. That reflects, of course, also, as I've said to this committee before, Ministers' commitments to Northern Ireland and to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland, rather than being something imposed upon us. So it is a necessity, and a slightly uncomfortable necessity for both sides.
Ollie Robbins there on the uncomfortable necessity, as he sees it, of the Irish backstop. And that really seems to be the message from ministers too, that there is much in this withdrawal agreement that they know many MPs find unpalatable, but it is a compromise document, and that will be the message that they're trying to sell in the coming days, in an attempt to try and chip away at this very high wall of resistance that clearly exists on the Tory backbenches at the moment.
Ben, as ever, thank you very much. You're watching Afternoon Live. Now, in the past hour, the man who admitted murdering Stoke-on-Trent midwife Samantha Eastwood has been sentenced to 17 years in prison. Miss Eastwood's body was found in a shallow grave in Caberswell, Staffordshire, 8 days after being reported missing. 32-year-old Michael Sterling from Bucknell pleaded guilty to the murder. He's the brother-in-law of Miss Eastwood's ex-fiancée. Joe Black has the background to the case.
Why are we jumping out of an aeroplane today?
To raise money for two charities. One's called For Louis and another one's Children's Hospice, where we live, called Donna Louise.
Samantha Eastwood living her life to the full. She was a much-loved daughter, sister and friend to many. The 28-year-old was a midwife, a career she'd set her sights on since she was 12. But after a night shift at the Royal Stoke University Hospital, she vanished. Her colleagues never saw her again. She was murdered, suffocated during an argument by this man, Michael Sterling, a man she was in a relationship with. He was married, a family man, and also the brother-in-law of her former fiancé.
It was here at this isolated spot where Samantha Eastwood's body was discovered. She was buried in a shallow grave, wrapped in a duvet, with tape around her eyes and face.
CCTV captured the landscape gardener driving around in his van. He was panicking, looking for somewhere to dispose of her body. As searches for Samantha began, Sterling helped with those efforts and even offered comfort to her distraught family. He also secretly used her mobile phone to send messages to them, suggesting she needed some time alone.
To go to those levels of deceit to the family, it's just unthinkable really, and I liken his actions to that of Ian Huntley, who was the ever helpful person in the initial inquiries with the police and the family. And I can't begin to say how enraged Gemma, Samantha's sister, is in terms of that hug. The impact that hug alone has had on Gemma is huge, because it's one thing killing somebody, but then to go and sympathise with the family and lay false alibis out that would tend to suggest she's still alive is just horrendous.
What have you done to Samantha? No comment. Have you killed Samantha Eastwood? No comment. If you haven't...
Once arrested, Sterling gave little away, but when he got to court, he pleaded guilty to murder.
We all wanted to find her alive and we didn't. To have somebody who delivers so much life into this world through being a midwife, to have her life taken so tragically is awful. And I like us to finish on remembering her and not Michael Sterling.
That was amazing. Thank you.
Sterling said he was deeply sorry, not for himself, but for all the others who are victims of his crime. Those words will mean very little to Samantha Eastwood's family, who are now facing their first Christmas without her. Joe Black, BBC News.
Well, speaking outside the court, Gemma Eastwood, Samantha's sister, said her family's lives would never be the same again.
Justice has been served today. No matter the outcome, nothing can bring my sister back. I have lost my best friend and sister. My mum has lost a kind, caring and loving daughter. Our lives will never be the same. We would like to thank our close friends and family for all the love and support through this tragic time. We would like to thank Staffordshire Police for putting such a strong case together in such a small space of time. We'd like to thank our family liaison officers for the constant support and guidance. We ask that everyone respects our privacy throughout this difficult time. Samantha is gone, but she'll never be forgotten.
Well, that was Gemma Eastwood. Senior Investigating Officer Detective Inspector Dan Eisen said Samantha's body was treated like dead animal.
My opinion on Michael Sterling is this is a man who was cruel and callous and arrogant, and I don't say that lightly, and I've said it again on previous interviews this week. His cruelness is from the way that he has laid lies and alibis and allowed the family to believe that Samantha was still alive in those first few days of her going missing. His callousness in the way he's disposed of her body, like a dead animal at the side of the road, burying it to be hidden forever, in our view, and then also his arrogance to think that he would ever get away with something like this, hiding it from her family, and of course us as the investigating body.
You're watching Afternoon Live. Now, Sir David Attenborough has described climate change as humanity's greatest threat in thousands of years. The naturalist and broadcaster said it could lead to the collapse of civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world. He was speaking at the opening ceremony of the United Nations-sponsored climate talks in Poland. The meeting is seen as the most critical on climate change since the 2015 Paris Agreement and is being attended by around 40 heads of state and government. Our environment correspondent Matt McGrath is at the summit.
All across the world, the disastrous impact of a changing climate can be clearly seen, say scientists. From fires to floods to droughts and deadly storms, the fingerprints of humanity's use of fossil fuels continues to emerge. Against this worrying background, the celebrated broadcaster Sir David Attenborough came to tell UN negotiators the harsh truth about the threat posed by climate change to humans and animals alike.
Right now, we're facing a man-made disaster of global scale. Our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change. If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. Leaders of the world, you must lead the continuation of our civilizations and the natural world upon which we depend is in your hands.
Sir David is not the only one raising his voice. In demonstrations around the world, young people have made it clear that this meeting must deliver significant action on cutting emissions. Some of the negotiators here agree that the issue is one of life and death.
The most important, critical, one of the key messages out of the IPCC is that the world needs to act. We literally have 12 years and we need massive investments on financial flows. If we don't have that financial flows, we are doomed.
But one of the big hurdles to progress on rising emissions is the dependence of many nations on coal.
Many delegates believe that to avoid deadly climate change, coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel, has no role in the future. But the Polish government disagrees vehemently. They say that it's a key part of the economy in this part of Poland, and it's literally under our feet here at this conference.
The pressure on the negotiators here has perhaps never been greater, but scientists believe that equally the threat to our fragile planet has never been more intense.
Now, that was Matt McGrath, our environment correspondent, talking then. On the basis that we're always the first to tell you when we make a mistake, normally because you spot them before we do, I just want to tell you what the HuffPost has been tweeting in the last few minutes. I'll just read it to you. We have deleted an earlier version of our video that incorrectly describes Sir David Attenborough as a naturist. We, of course, meant to describe him as a naturalist, and we regret the error. These things happen. You're watching Afternoon Live from BBC News. The head of MI6 has warned Russia not to underestimate our capabilities. Delivering a rare speech at St Andrews University, Alex Younger described these to students how intelligence agencies are developing a fourth generation of espionage as adversaries take advantage of the blurred lines between the cyber and the physical worlds. Correspondent Richard Gulpin has more details.
He's been in post as head of MI6 for 4 years, and this is only his second speech in public. And I think inevitably, after what happened in this country in Salisbury with the Novichok attack, which was carried out by Russian agents, Russia has been a major focus. And he came out with this phrase. He said that Russia seems to believe it's in a state of perpetual confrontation with the United Kingdom. And he then went on to issue this warning to the Kremlin.
We will be successful nonetheless, and I urge Russia or any other state intent on subverting our way of life not to underestimate our determination and our capabilities, or those of our allies. We can do this to any opponent at any time.
Now, another part of the speech was very much what seemed like a recruitment drive. Obviously, it was in front of a lot of young students aspiring, and he talked about the need for much greater diversity in MI6, and he said that people from all sorts of different backgrounds should now apply to step forward, he said, to take up a role, even if they'd never considered doing anything like spying for MI6. Another key point, I think, when he talked about the need to strengthen security ties ahead of Brexit. This is a really vexed issue. Obviously, a lot of work is going on into that, but there's a real concern that the intelligence agencies here will no longer have access to databases within Europe, and obviously that's something which is being worked on.
Richard Gulpin talking to me a little earlier. You're watching Afternoon Live. Our headlines today. Oliver Robbins, the top civil servant who's been advising Theresa May on Brexit, tells MPs that the Irish backstop is not the future relationship either the UK or the EU wants. The Attorney-General, who's due to speak to MPs shortly, releases a summary of his legal advice on Brexit to the government, but won't publish the full document. In other news, the man who admitted murdering Stoke-on-Trent midwife, Samantha Eastwood, has been jailed for life. Coming up, a vegan brings a landmark legal case against his former employer over claims he was sacked on the basis of his beliefs, which he says are akin to a religion.
And in sport, there's been a lot of fallout from yesterday's Premier League football. Football Association has charged Arsenal and Tottenham with failing to control their players during the North London derby. Arsenal won it 4-2. Jurgen Klopp has also been charged with misconduct for this celebration on the pitch, following Liverpool's injury-time winner against Everton in the Merseyside derby. At Southampton, they've sacked their manager Mark Hughes after 8 months in charge. The club lie 1 point off the bottom of the table in the relegation zone. I'll be back with all those details in the next 15 minutes. Here.
Now, if you want to see how bad things are for the retail sector, just go out and look at your nearest high street. Rising costs, sluggish sales and online competition, just some of the factors blamed for the demise of names such as Maplin, Toys R Us and Poundworld. The consequences for those working in the sector are severe. Research carried out by the BBC reveals that 20,000 jobs have already been lost since the beginning of the year, with another 20,000 under threat. Our business correspondent Theo Leggett has more.
John Brailsford has worked in retail all his life. He's been made redundant 5 times.
Watch that rug.
Most recently, earlier this year, by Carpetright, which has closed a swathe of its stores. He's since found another job, and he says others should be encouraged by his example.
If you are made redundant, don't panic. Just take a step back. Find the company that you want to work for. There's plenty of jobs out there. If you have to take a lower position, take one. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
John is one of thousands of retail workers who've been affected by a chill wind blowing down the high street. Household names like Toys R Us and BHS have disappeared, while other chains such as Debenhams and House of Fraser say they will close stores. The retail sector is a major employer in this country. It still accounts for 2.8 million jobs, but the industry's changing. Last month, 18% of all transactions were carried out online. 10 years ago, it was just 5%. The growing popularity of online shopping is undoubtedly one reason why traditional stores are struggling. BBC research suggests 20,000 retail jobs have gone so far this year, and another 20,000 could be at risk.
We have been calling for some time now for a strategy with the politicians, employers and communities to look at in more detail what we can do to firstly secure the high street, look at the change in habits that's taken place in retail in general, but also get this message across that retail is a real job, it's a proper job.
Many of those who lose their jobs leave the retail sector altogether, but recruiters say most of them will have skills that can be used just as effectively elsewhere.
There's so much opportunity for people to change careers, do lots of different things, and really take those transferable skills with them into other sectors and have other careers. But equally, for people that love retail, there's still some fantastic opportunities still in retail.
The government insists it is acting to support the high street, setting aside money to improve town centres and offering discounts on business rates for small retailers. But analysts say changes within the industry mean further job cuts are inevitable, and many more people will have little choice but to look for work in other parts of the economy. Theo Leggett, BBC News.
Now, a court has ruled that a man who claimed he was the victim of an alleged VIP paedophile ring can now be named. The man, revealed as 50-year-old Carl Beach, had previously been known by the pseudonym Nick. He's been charged with 12 counts of perverting the course of justice and 1 count of fraud. He made allegations against the ex-chief of the Defence Staff, Lord Bramall, and the politicians Sir Edward Heath, Lord Britton and Harvey Proctor. The claims led to a £2.5 million inquiry by Scotland Yard, but no action resulted from his allegations. This afternoon's ruling came from Newcastle Crown Court. Now, a vegan is bringing a landmark legal action in which a tribunal will decide for the first time whether veganism is a philosophical belief akin to a religion and therefore protected in law. Jordi Casamechana claims he was discriminated against by the League Against Cruel Sports because of his vegan beliefs after he was fired for disclosing it invested pension funds in companies that carried out tests on animals. Our legal correspondent Clive Coleman has been to meet him.
If these were puppies, do you think people should have the choice to kill them this way?
This is veganism in action.
This shows you the whole life of the animal, how they kill.
Jordi Casamechana is an ethical vegan who regularly takes to the streets of London to inform and persuade others that they should take up the vegan lifestyle.
Some people only eat a vegan diet, but they don't care about the environment or the animals because they care only about their health, for instance. I care about the animals and the environment and my health and everything. That's why I use this term ethical veganism, because for me veganism is a belief and affects every single aspect of my life.
Jordi worked for the League Against Cruel Sports and claims that, to his surprise, he discovered it was investing its pension funds in companies that carried out animal testing. He says he drew this to his boss's attention, but when nothing changed, he informed other employees and was sacked as a result. Jordi is now bringing a legal case claiming he was discriminated against on the basis of his vegan belief. In a statement, the League Against Cruel Sports said, Mr Kazimierjana was dismissed from his position because of gross misconduct. To link his dismissal with issues pertaining to veganism is factually wrong. We emphatically reject this claim. Whether ethical veganism can amount in law to a philosophical belief is the issue at the heart of this dispute. For veganism to qualify as a philosophical belief, it has to meet a number of criteria. So, for instance, it has to be a genuinely held belief, it has to cover a substantial part of a person's life, and it has to be worthy of respect in a democratic society. So that means that it can't interfere with the fundamental human rights of everyone else. But just how practical is the legal recognition of everyone's beliefs?
The irony in all this is that rights are intended to be liberating. But if we're all turned into rights bearers with my rights clashing with your rights, we end up having to appeal to the courts to sort out our differences. And that can become oppressive for everybody.
Next year, a tribunal will, for the first time, decide if veganism is a philosophical belief protected by law. The case could provide us with protection against discrimination in employment, education, and the provision of goods and services. Clive Coleman, BBC News.
Now, the latest mission to the International Space Station has blasted off in the first manned Soyuz rocket launch since a dramatic failure in October. 2 astronauts from the US and Canada and a Russian cosmonaut lifted off from Kazakhstan, this time without incident. October's aborted trip saw 2 cosmonauts forced to make an emergency landing just minutes after takeoff. Someone else has been looking up at the sky. Chris Fawkes is here with his friend.
Yes, these are the dogs again.
Yes.
Did you get the answers?
Now that is a borzoi. I think it's pronounced a B-O-R-Z-O-I, and Linda McDonald, who's an author, she tweeted that, and I've checked, and she's absolutely right.
And that makes sense, because Weather Watcher,
Oh,
Phil,
there you go.
and
Well, the clue was there already.
There we go, the clue was there. I told you I just had to do the weather bits. You're the dog expert. What about the others? How did we get on with the other?
Well, we got that right. It's a Cocker Spaniel.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And these 2?
A pug and a... I can't remember what I said. What was it?
Pass. I can't remember either. But we did okay anyway, didn't we?
Well, yeah.
But I've got something else to show you, actually. We'll take a quick look at what's coming up weather-wise for the next few days.
Right.
The weather's going to be pretty cloudy. Rain returns midweek, and it's going to get very windy, potentially with some severe gales as well. Now, I want to show you about what's been going on today weather-wise. We've got a load of showers on the radar picture and a load of cloud working in here. Take a look at what's just come into our Weather Watchers pictures.
A double rainbow?
No, it's not.
Well, it is.
Just move out of the way.
Oh, it's a triple? Oh.
It's a triple. There are actually 3 rainbows on this picture.
Well, you were standing in front of it. I couldn't see.
So there's one there, there's another one there, and there's another one that comes up from there.
And how unusual is that?
I've never ever seen one. Have you?
Nope, not until
I think these are incredibly rare things to actually be spotted and to get photographed. This was from our Weather Watcher Gordon from Frampton-on-Severn in Gloucestershire. It just came in the last 10 minutes, and yeah, it's having me scratching my head.
So what happens? Do you all sit there and go, gosh, look what's coming, and you all crowd round in that excitement that I've known exists in the Weather Centre?
I think that is quite exciting, though. It's quite cool. I didn't even know you could get triple rainbows, I have to admit.
Well, he might have had a dirty lens on his camera or something.
Well, I think we should just wonder at it. I mean, this is quite typical. One thing you do get with double rainbows is, can you see that there's lighter sky underneath this rainbow and the sky's darker above it? That's one thing you get with these double rainbows, but there you go, a triple rainbow.
Yeah, your producer's gesturing at me, but I'm not sure it's something I can repeat. Anyway, a triple rainbow. Well, I never.
Shall we move on?
Yeah.
OK, well, well, I was impressed anyway. As far as the weather goes today, well, overnight tonight, we've still got our feed of showers coming into northwestern parts of the UK. And with temperatures falling sharply, there is going to be a widespread frost out and about, not just in the towns and cities, but in the countryside, -5 degrees or so in the coldest spots. And bear in mind, where we see those showers across the north and west, that poses the risk of some icy stretches on untreated surfaces to take us into the first part of Tuesday morning. And Tuesday, I think for most of us actually, is going to be the coldest day of the week ahead. We're looking at a fair bit of sunshine after that cold start. There will be showers again across the north and west of the country. Temperatures really struggling. We're looking at highs just getting into single figures, so around 7 to 9 degrees Celsius fairly typically. Maybe a 9 for London, 11 towards Plymouth as we start to see some milder air moving into the southwest late in the day along with some rain. And rain is going to return and make a big appearance towards the middle part of the week. Wet weather, and with southwesterly winds, we're dragging in milder air. So those temperatures will be rising again on Wednesday across a good part of the UK. We're looking at 10 to 12 degrees fairly widely. Cold air still in Scotland, and as that rain bumps into the cold air, we could see a little bit of snow for a time across the southern uplands, the higher parts. Now, as we go into the end of the week, as I mentioned before, we are looking at some very windy weather, potentially severe gales on this deepening area of low pressure as it crosses the country, so that could bring the risk of some disruption. Strong winds then, and outbreaks of rain that will tend to ease to showers, but look at the temperatures. We're still on the mild side, 14 degrees, but we have to keep an eye on this nasty-looking area of low pressure. Friday brings the risk of some localised disruption, not just to transport, but maybe also to power supplies as well. And that's how the latest weather's looking.
I've just had a tweet.
OK.
From...
What have you got?
It says, that picture you were showing,
yes.
And he said, he's called Shh, but that's his Twitter name, but he says it's a reflection rainbow reflecting off raindrops. And I've done a very quick look online, and he may have a point, because that's what they are.
Yes, I think that's probably right. With these double rainbows, and presumably triple ones, it's where the sunlight gets split up and it bounces around the inside of the raindrops.
Yeah.
So I presume what happens with these ones is that the path of the raindrop has just bounced around a few more times. I think it's the next slide. Let's. There it is. So right. I think it's
get out of the way again, because people can't see the third one. There we are. There we go. Right.
So there's the first main rainbow. You've got the second rainbow here, and the third one, this reflection rainbow, popping up, and it's probably due to the number of times the light waves bounce around the inside of the raindrops towards the viewer, we think.
Well, you better be right. Thank you very much, Chris. More from me later on. Chris Fox there. Now, I just want to bring you some news. I'm just getting in from our colleagues at Radio Leeds, who say York Station has been evacuated. This happened in the last few minutes. York Station evacuated after the power cut that has hit a large part of the city. So two stories were breaking here. First is that the station's been evacuated. The other is that there's a huge power cut that's affecting parts of York. Now, staff at London North Eastern Railway, which run the station, say no trains are running in or out. We're on it. We're going to find out what that's about, and I'll bring you more on that in the next half hour or so.
Join us live from Tate Britain as we reveal the winner of the most prestigious prize in British art, the 2018 Turner Prize, tomorrow at 9:30 on the BBC News Channel.
This is BBC News, our latest headlines. Oliver Robbins, the top civil servant who's been advising Theresa May on Brexit, tells MPs that the Irish backstop is not the future relationship either the UK or the EU wants.
It is an uncomfortable position for both sides, and the reality is, you know, I think, Chair, in evidence from us, but also in your meetings in Brussels, is that there is not a withdrawal agreement without a backstop.
The Attorney-General, who's due to speak to MPs shortly, has released a summary of his legal advice to the government, but won't publish the full document. The man who murdered Stoke-on-Trent midwife Samantha Eastwood has been jailed for life. Michael Sterling admitted killing Miss Eastwood after a long-standing affair. Sir David Attenborough tells an international summit on climate change that without action, much of the natural world could become extinct.
If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilizations and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon.
Surprise in Spain as a far-right party wins seats in a regional election for the first time in decades. Let's get the sport now with Ollie Foster, and wow, it's been a busy afternoon at the FA.
It really has. We had some big derbies yesterday in the Premier League, so passion's always likely to boil over in big derby matches, so no wonder that the FA disciplinary department's inbox was fairly full this morning. They had a few items to look into. They've charged Arsenal and Tottenham with failing to control their players in the North London derby. The official wording is that they failed to ensure that their players conduct themselves in an orderly fashion. I'm going to hand back to you in an orderly fashion straight away, Simon.
Yeah,
Sorry.
do it quickly, because I was just looking away, and there's the Attorney General. He's just giving his statement to the House of Commons. Let's join him.
Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I wish to make a statement to the House. I should make clear the context in which I consider that I am to do so today. My statement today is intended to inform the debate that is shortly to commence on the motion to approve the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration on the future relationship concluded with the European Union by my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister. It is important, Mr. Speaker, to understand how the law officers have give their advice, which may be a mixture of oral and written communications given at different times during fast-developing events. Ministers are advised by their own departmental lawyers, and the points that arise for consideration of the law officers are invariably limited to the relatively few of particular importance to the policy decision of the government. Therefore, my statement today is complemented by a detailed legal commentary provided for the purpose of the debate and published this morning, which analyses the effect of the agreement as a whole. That legal commentary has been produced with my oversight and approval, and I commend it to the House as both an accurate examination of the provisions of the agreement and a helpful exposition of some of the salient issues that arise from them. There is, of course, no want of other sources of helpful commentary available to the House. In making this statement in these unusual circumstances, and in answering any questions that honourable members may have, I consider that I have a solemn and constitutional duty to this House to advise it on these legal questions objectively and impartially, and to place such legal expertise as I have at its disposal. The historical precedents strongly support that view. The House may be sure that I shall discharge this duty with uncompromising and rigorous fidelity. If this agreement is to pass this House, as I strongly believe it should, I do not believe that it can or should pass under any misapprehension whatsoever as to the legal matters on which that judgment should be based. It is important to recall that the matters of law affecting the withdrawal agreement can only inform what is essentially a political decision that each of us must make. This is not a question of the lawfulness of the government's action, but of the prudence as a matter of policy and political judgment of entering into an international agreement on the terms proposed. In the time available to me, it is impossible to have covered each of the matters of law that might arise from 585 pages of complicated legal text, and no Attorney General, and certainly not this one, can instantly possess the answers to all of the pertinent questions that the skill and ingenuity of honourable members may devise. However, I am aware that there are certain parts of the agreement, the meaning of which attracts the close and keen interest of the House, and it is to some of these that I now turn. First, the Northern Ireland Protocol, and some of the other provisions of the withdrawal agreement relevant to it. The protocol would come into force, if needed, on the conclusion of the implementation period on the 31st of December 2020, unless, pursuant to Article 132 of the agreement, both the UK and the EU agree to a single extension for a fixed time of up to 1 or 2 years. By Article 1, the protocol confirms that it would affect neither the constitutional status of Northern Ireland nor the principle of consent as set out in the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement. The statutory guarantee that a majority in Northern Ireland would be required to consent to a change in its constitutional status as part of the United Kingdom, and the associated amendment to the Irish Constitution to remove its previous territorial claim remain in place. Once in force, by Article 2.1 of the Protocol, the parties would be obliged in good faith to use their best endeavours to conclude, by the 31st of December 2020, an agreement that supersedes it. There is a separate but closely related duty on the parties under Article 184 to negotiate expeditiously and use best endeavours in good faith to conclude an agreement in line with the political declaration. Having regard to those obligations, by Article 1.4 of the Protocol, it is expressly agreed not to be intended to establish a permanent relationship, but to be temporary. That language reflects the fact that Article 50 of the Treaty on European Union does not provide a legal basis in Union law for permanent future arrangements with non-member states. If either party did not comply with its obligations of good faith, after the implementation period, it would be open to them to bring a complaint under the dispute settlement provisions set out in Articles 164 to 181 of the agreement. These include independent arbitration. Clear and convincing evidence would be required to establish a breach of that obligation. If the protocol were to come into force, it would continue to apply in international law unless and until it was superseded by the intended subsequent agreement which achieved the stated objectives of maintaining the necessary conditions for continued North-South cooperation, avoiding a hard border, and protecting the Belfast Agreement in all its dimensions. There is, therefore, no unilateral right for either party to terminate this arrangement. This means that if no superseding agreement can be reached within the implementation period, the protocol would be activated, and in international law would subsist even if negotiations had broken down. How likely that is to happen is a political question, to which the answer will no doubt depend partly on the extent to which it is in either party's interests to remain indefinitely within its arrangements. Under the protocol, the UK would form with the EU a single customs territory for goods for fiscal or tariff purposes. Accordingly, Northern Ireland would form part of the same customs territory as Great Britain, with no tariffs, quotas or checks on rules of origin between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. However, Northern Ireland would additionally apply defined aspects of the EU's single market rules relating to the regulation and control of the supply of electricity on the island of Ireland, goods, including cross-border VAT rules, and the EU Customs Code. These rules would be enforced as they are now, including preliminary references from Northern Ireland courts to the Court of Justice of the European Union. By these means, the need for any hard border would be avoided, and goods originating in Northern Ireland would be entitled to free circulation throughout the EU single market. In all other aspects of its regulatory regime, Northern Ireland would follow the applicable UK legislation, save where these were devolved. Mr. Speaker, by Article 7, a Northern Ireland business would also enjoy the same free circulation of its goods throughout the United Kingdom, while its EU competitor, whether situated in the Republic of Ireland or elsewhere in the single market, would not. Mr. Speaker, I turn now to the role of union law and the CJEU under the withdrawal agreement and within the dispute settlement provisions. It is important to place these provisions in the context of the objectives of the agreement, which is the orderly exit of the UK from the EU for our citizens and businesses. To this end, following the implementation period, the agreement provides for the continued application of union law in defined and strictly limited respects where it is necessary or desirable for legal certainty to do so. Although we will legally leave the EU and cease to be a member state on March the 29th, 2019, Part 4 of the agreement provides for an implementation or transition period of 21 months, which is designed to enable our people and our businesses to adjust to the changes that are coming. During that implementation period, so as to give the time, predictability and continuity that is needed, it is provided that union law should continue to apply, and the laws, systems and institutions of the EU will have